I want to tell you about the town I grew up in and about the urban legend everybody there knows. And I want you to actually pay attention, even to the parts that sound like a silly kid story, especially those parts, because the silly kid story is the most important part, and by the end, you'll understand why. There is a warning in all this, and the warning is real, and it is for you, because you do not live in my town and nobody ever taught you the rules. So stay with me. Read all of it. Do not decide halfway through that you have it figured out, because you do not. And getting it wrong is the kind of mistake you only make once. Let me start at the beginning, which means letting me start with me coming home. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place that does not show up on most maps, tucked away in a part of the country where the land rolls and the sky is big and the storms, when they come, are the main event of the whole season. I left when I was 18, the way you do, off to the wider world to make something of myself. And I will spare you the details of all that because they do not matter and they are not the point. What matters is that years later, in my mid-20s, things in the wider world had not worked out the way I planned, and I found myself adrift and a little broke and a lot lonely. And I did the thing you swear as a teenager you will never do. I went home. It was supposed to be temporary, just a place to land, to save some money, to figure out my next move. My great-aunt Odette still lived in the old house at the edge of town, the one where I had spent every summer as a kid, and she had room, and she was getting on in years and could use the company. So I moved into my old summer bedroom, and I told myself it was just for a little while. Coming home as an adult is a strange thing. The town was exactly as I had left it, which was comforting and unsettling at the same time. The same streets, the same store, the same diner, the same faces, just a little older. But I was not the same. I had been away. I had seen other places, and that put a kind of distance between me and the town that I had never felt growing up. I was from there. Everybody knew me. And at the same time, I was an outsider now. A person who had left and come back, who saw the place with half an insider's eye and half a stranger's. And it was that stranger's eye, I think, that first noticed the thing I had completely forgotten about, the legend, the thing about the storms. Because here is the thing, when you grow up somewhere, the strange things about it do not seem strange. They are just how things are. And my town had a rule about storms that I had absorbed so completely as a child that I had stopped seeing it, the way you stop hearing a clock tick in a room you live in. When a real storm came, a big one, with thunder and close lightning, people went inside. All of them, fast. And they stayed inside, away from the windows, until it passed. As a kid, I thought every town was like that. It was only coming back as an adult, with that stranger's eye, that I started to notice how serious it was, how it was not just sensible caution about lightning, how there was something underneath it, a fear, an old deep fear that the grown-ups carried and did not talk about. The first time I really noticed it, I was at the diner having coffee, catching up with an old friend named Marisol. Marisol and I had been close as kids, inseparable one summer, and she had stayed in town and grown up into a careful, watchful woman, kind but guarded in a way she had not been as a girl. We were talking about nothing, about old times, and outside the sky was starting to go that bruised green-grey color it gets before weather. And I said, just making conversation, "Hey, you remember that old ghost story about the storms? The thing in the lightning? We used to scare each other with that." And Marisol's face changed, just for a second. The friendly catching up look went away and something else came into her eyes, something quick and cold, and she glanced out the window at the darkening sky. And then she looked back at me and she said lightly, too lightly, "Oh, that old thing, kids stuff. Hey, did you hear the Pruitts sold their place?" And just like that, she changed the subject, smooth as anything. And I let her, because it was good to see her, and I did not want to make it weird. But I noticed, that stranger's eye noticed. She had not laughed. When you bring up a silly childhood ghost story to an old friend, they laugh, they get nostalgic. They say something like, "Oh my gosh, I had forgotten about that." Marisol had not laughed. She had checked the sky. That was the first thread, and once I had noticed it, I could not stop pulling it. I started paying attention, and the more I paid attention, the stranger it got. It was everywhere, once you knew to look, woven so deep into the life of the town that the people doing it did not even know they were doing it. Everybody watched the sky, all the time. Just quick glances up, casual, the way you might check the time, but constant. A whole town of people who kept one eye on the weather always. The houses were all built tight and close and shuttered, with the heavy storm shutters that actually worked, that people actually closed, and not just for show. There was a town siren, an old one, that I remembered from childhood, and I had always assumed it was a tornado siren like any small town has, but I started to notice that it got tested more often than seemed normal, and that when it was tested, people stopped what they were doing and went still and located the nearest door, automatically, without seeming to know they were doing it, before they relaxed and went back to their business. And there were the marks. This is the thing that really got me, the thing that turned my idle curiosity into something more like obsession. Scattered around town, in odd places, there were scorch marks, dark patches, burned into the ground, into pavement, into the dirt of an empty lot, into a patch of a field by the road. Roughly the size and shape of a person, if a person had been standing there and then been burned away. I started seeing them everywhere once I noticed the first one. And here is the strange part, the part that made the back of my neck prickle. People stepped around them, without looking at them, without seeming to see them at all. I watched an old man walk down the sidewalk and step out into the street and back up onto the sidewalk in a smooth little curve to go around one of those marks, and his eyes never went to it. His face never changed. He just went around it, the way you go around a puddle you are not consciously looking at, and then went on. The whole town did it. They walked around the scorch marks, and they did not look at them. And if you asked about them, which I started to do, they would get a blank look, like they could not quite figure out what you were talking about. And then they would change the subject, and you would realize you had hit the same wall Marisol had put up in the diner. A smooth, practiced, town-wide wall of not talking about it. I asked Odette about it, because Odette had raised me summers, and I figured if anyone would tell me straight, it was her. We were having dinner, and I said, "Aunt Odette, what is the deal with the storms, with everybody going inside and the marks on the ground, and that old story about the lightning? What is that really about?" And my great aunt, who was a sharp, funny, talkative woman, went quiet. She set down her fork. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I could not read, something sad and weighing and a little afraid. And then she said, "Reese, some things in this town we don't go poking at. Not because they're silly, because they're not. You grew up here. You know the rule. When it storms, you come inside. That's all you need to know. And it's all you need to do. Leave the rest alone." And she picked her fork back up. And that was the end of it. And I knew her well enough to know that pushing would get me nowhere. But of course, telling a person to leave a thing alone is the surest way to make them unable to leave it alone. I was bored, and I was adrift, and I had a mystery in my own hometown, a real one, a thing that the whole town knew and would not say, and chasing it made me feel alive in a way I had not felt since I came back, made me feel like I belonged, like I was an insider cracking a secret instead of an outsider who had failed in the world and slunk home. So I kept pulling the thread. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself it was just a quirky local mystery. I had no idea, none, that the thread I was pulling was attached to something that could reach back down the thread and pull me. I started asking around, casually, the way you do, and the more I asked the stranger, the asking got. I went into the hardware store, which had been run by the same family since before I was born, and I got to talking with the old man behind the counter about the weather. Easy, friendly. And I worked my way around to it, asked him about the old storm story, asked if there was anything to it, and I watched the same thing happen to his face that had happened to Marisol's in the diner. The friendliness went somewhere else. He got busy with something behind the counter, suddenly, and he said, not looking at me, "You want to be inside when it storms, son. That's all. Your aunt teach you that?" And I said she had. And he said, "Then you know what you need to know." And he found something to do at the far end of the counter, and the conversation was over. Just like that. A wall. It happened over and over. I would bring it up and people would close like a flower at night, quick and complete, and steer me somewhere else. And the strange thing, the thing I kept noticing, was that they were not annoyed with me. Not exactly. They were not treating me like an idiot asking about a silly story. They were treating me the way you treat a kid who has wandered too close to the edge of something, with a kind of careful, gentle steering. Get back from there. Come on, look over here instead. They were managing me, the whole town, without ever coordinating it, without ever saying a word to each other about it, knew exactly how to handle someone asking too many questions about the storms, the way a body knows how to close a wound. It was practiced. It was old. And the more I felt that practiced gentleness steering me away, the more I understood that there was something real at the center of it. Something the whole town had been organized around for so long that the organizing had become invisible, just the shape of how things were done. And the marks. I kept coming back to the marks. I made myself really look at them, since no one else would. There was one in the empty lot behind the old grocery, a person-shaped scorch burned right into the packed dirt, and grass would not grow on it. And it had been there, I slowly realized, asking careful questions, for longer than anyone would say, years maybe, not fading, not weathering away the way a burn should. There was one on the sidewalk on the east side of town that the concrete had been poured around, I swear. The sidewalk laid in sections that came right up to the edge of the mark and stopped and started again on the far side, as if even the people pouring the concrete had not been willing to cover it or had not been able to. And every one of them had that same quality, that person shape, that sense of something that had been standing there and then was simply not, burned off the surface of the world, and the town flowing around each one like water around a stone, never looking, never naming, for so long that the not looking was bone deep. The first storm came about 2 weeks after I moved back. It was not a big one. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. It was a smaller storm, distant, the kind that rumbles around the edges of the sky without really committing. But it was the first storm since I had come home, and by then I was primed, watching for it, curious. So when the thunder started up far off in the evening, I did the thing I'd been told not to do. I went out onto Odette's porch to watch. Odette did not like it. She came to the door and she said, "Reese, get in here." And I said, "It's miles off, Aunt Odette. Look, it's not even close. I just want to watch it for a minute." And she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her mouth tight. And she did not come out onto the porch with me, I noticed. She stayed in the doorway with one hand on the frame, ready to go back in. And she watched me, not the storm, me. So I watched the storm from the porch, feeling a little defiant, a little foolish, mostly just enjoying the show the way I had always loved storms as a kid. The thunder rolled far away. The lightning flickered on the horizon, sheet lightning mostly, lighting up the bellies of the clouds. And now and then a real bolt, a vein of white down to the distant ground, miles off across the fields. It was beautiful. It was just a storm. And then, in one of the flashes, I saw a figure standing in the field. It was far away, out across the open field that stretched from the edge of Odette's property toward the tree line. And it was only there for the half second of the flash. A tall, thin, dark shape, standing alone in the middle of the open field where there was nothing. No reason for anything to be. No scarecrow, no post, no person who would be out in a field at the start of a storm. Just a tall, thin, still figure, facing me, or facing the house. It was too far and too quick to tell. And then the flash was gone, and the field was dark. I stared at the spot, my heart suddenly going faster. I waited for the next flash. It came a few seconds later and lit up the field, and the figure was gone. There was nothing there, just the empty field, the grass moving in the wind ahead of the storm. I told myself it was nothing. Of course I did. A trick of the light, a shadow, a fence post I had not noticed, catching the flash a certain way. My own mind primed by 2 weeks of obsessing over a ghost story and ready to see ghosts. That is what I told myself. But I also noticed that I went back inside after that, and that I did not argue when Odette closed the door behind me, and that I did not sleep very well that night, and that some animal part of me, underneath all my reasonable explanations, had filed that image away as real and important and was not letting me forget it. A tall, thin figure standing in an empty field, there in one flash and gone in the next. I should have listened to that animal part of me. It knew. It always knows, before the reasoning part will let you say it. I dug harder after that. The figure in the field, even though I had explained it away, had lit a fire under me, and I went at the mystery in earnest. I went to the little town library and I looked through old local history, the county records, the kind of thing nobody ever looks at. And I started to find things. Not answers exactly. The town had been careful over the years about what it wrote down. But I found gaps. I found old accounts of bad storms way back, from the early days of the town, that were described in strange, careful language, storms after which people were said to have been lost, but never with details, never with the ordinary details of a tragedy. No descriptions of how, just lost in the storm, a whole family lost in the storm, and then nothing, the record moving on. I found that the town had been built the way it was built on purpose, tight and close and shuttered, by founders who had written in one old document that the town must be a place where no one is ever far from a wall. And I had thought that was a strange thing to care about until I started to understand what it meant. The old records had a feeling to them, the longer I read, that I find hard to describe. It was the feeling of people trying to write around a thing without writing it down. You could feel the shape of what they were not saying, the way you can feel the shape of a piece of furniture under a sheet. There was a town meeting record from a long time back where the only thing written was that it was agreed the matter of the storms would not be set down in writing again and would be kept in the old way, which was the spoken way, and that the young would be taught as they had always been taught. The old way, the spoken way, taught as they had always been taught. I read those words in that dim, quiet library, and I felt the hair stand up on my arms, because I understood that I was reading the moment a whole town had decided, on purpose, to stop writing its most important truth down, to take it out of books where it could be found by the wrong person and put it back into mouths where only the town could carry it. And I understood that whatever the truth was, it was bad enough that they had decided the safest place for it was inside a child's memory, dressed up as something harmless. The librarian, an old woman who had been the librarian when I was a boy, watched me reading those records, and she did not stop me. But when I was leaving, she said quietly, not looking up from her desk, "Your great-aunt know you're reading those?" And I said something about just being curious about town history, and she looked at me then, over her glasses, with an expression that was not unkind, but was very serious. And she said, "Curiosity is a fine thing, Reese, but there's a reason those old folks stopped writing some things down. They weren't being mysterious. They were being careful. You'd do well to be careful too." And she went back to her work, and I left, and I felt that I had been warned, gently, the way the whole town warned, and that the warning had a weight to it that the smiling ghost story never did. And I found the rhyme. You know the rhyme, or you know one like it, because they exist all over, in lots of places. The little thing kids are taught about counting the seconds between the lightning and the thunder to tell how far away the storm is. Every kid learns some version of it. We had one in my town, a sing-song little counting rhyme, and I had known it my whole childhood and never thought a thing about it. And when I came across a reference to it in the old records, my own town's specific version of the counting rhyme, written down by one of the founders, I felt the back of my neck prickle again because of the way it was written down. It was not written down as a charming local saying. It was written down as a warning. The founder had written the rhyme out, the kids' counting rhyme, and underneath it, he had written in the careful hand of a frightened man that this was never to be spoken aloud during a storm, that it had been put into the mouths of children as a game so that it would be remembered, but that anyone who spoke it aloud while the lightning was close was calling, and that what they were calling would answer. I sat in that quiet library with that old book, and I felt the whole thing tip over from a quaint mystery into something cold and real, because I understood suddenly what I was looking at. The town had taken a piece of dangerous knowledge, the thing about the counting, and it had hidden it inside a children's rhyme on purpose, so that the knowledge would survive forever, passed mouth to mouth by kids who thought it was only a song, even if every adult who understood what it really meant died or forgot. It was hidden in plain sight. It had been hidden in plain sight in my own mouth since I was 5 years old. I went to Marisol after that. I think I scared her, showing up at her place with the old records, talking fast, because she took one look at me and her face went tight and worried, and she pulled me inside and shut the door, and she said, "What are you doing, Reese? What are you doing?" And I laid it all out for her. Everything I had found, the figure in the field, the marks, the records, the rhyme, and she listened to all of it with her arms wrapped around herself, getting paler. And when I was done, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "You need to stop. I mean it. You need to stop right now before you get yourself killed, or worse, before you call it down on the rest of us." And I said, "What? Called what down?" And she looked at me with real fear in her eyes. The fear I had seen flickers of all over town, finally out in the open. And she told me, not all of it, but enough. She told me the legend was real, that the thing in the storm was real, that it walked in the lightning, and that the rule, come inside when it storms, was not caution, it was survival. She told me that everyone in town knew, in the deep down way where they did not talk about it even to themselves, and that the not talking about it was part of how the town stayed sane, stayed functional, stayed alive. And she told me the rules, the real ones, underneath the ghost story, the ones the adults knew and the kids only half learned. When a real storm comes, you get inside before the lightning starts striking close. Once it's close, you do not go out, not for anything. You stay away from the windows during the flashes. And if you are ever caught outside when it's close, which God forbid, you do not run. That was the one she said hardest, gripping my arm. Do not run, because it only moves when you can't see it. In the flash, when the lightning lights everything up, it stands still. It can't come while you're looking at it. It moves in the dark between the flashes. So if you're caught out, you stand still. You keep your eyes on the open ground. And when it flashes, you look, you find it, you fix your eyes on it, and you do not look away. And you work your way to a wall, to a door, to light, slow, never running, never closing your eyes, never looking away during the dark. Because every second your eyes are off, it is a second it comes closer. And you never ever say the counting rhyme out loud, because that calls it. That's the whole of it, she said. That's everything. And now you know. And I need you to stop digging and just live by it like the rest of us. Because the digging, Reese, the asking, the stirring it all up, I think it notices. I think when people start poking at it, it pays more attention. So please stop. I told her I would. I think I even meant it. But it was already too late. because the thing she was afraid of, the noticing, I think it had already started. And a few days later, it took someone right in front of me. And after that, I did not have to be told to take it seriously ever again. There was a man who had moved to town not long before I came back. A newcomer like me, except he had never grown up there. So he did not have the rules in his bones the way even I half did. His name was Calder. Nice enough guy, kept to himself, did not know anybody well. And he did not believe in the legend, because why would he? Nobody had told him the true version. All he had was the smiling ghost story version the town tells newcomers, the version designed to make you careful without making you panic. He thought it was quaint. He thought, like I had thought, that it was charming small-town color. A real storm came in the late afternoon, fast, the way the bad ones do. The sky went black-green, and the wind came up, and the first thunder cracked, and it was close from the start. This one, close and getting closer. And the town did what the town does. Everybody inside, shutters closing, the streets emptying in minutes. I was at the diner again when it started, and I got inside, and through the big front window I watched the street empty out and the storm come on. And Calder was out there, walking, just walking down the sidewalk with a bag of groceries, in no hurry, because he did not know, because nobody had ever made him understand. And I watched the lightning start to strike close. Real strikes now, bright and near, the thunder right on top of the flashes. And I watched this man stroll down an emptying street into the worst of it, and I felt the whole diner go silent and tense around me. Everybody watching, nobody going out, because the rule is you do not go out, not for anything, not even for this. And then, in a flash, I saw it. It was standing at the far end of the street, where a second before there had been nothing. Tall and thin and dark and wrong. A burned-looking figure. The surface of it, like scorched wood, like something that had been struck by lightning so many times, it had stopped being anything but a shape the lightning left behind. It was too still. It was facing down the street toward Calder. And then the flash was gone, and the street went dark. The next flash, it was closer. Halfway down the street now, that tall, burned thing, nearer to Calder, who had stopped walking now, who had finally felt something wrong, who was looking around in the storm with the dawning confusion of a man who has realized he is the only one outside. The flash died. Dark. The next flash. Closer still. And now Calder saw it. I saw the moment he saw it, his whole body jerking with the shock of it, the bag of groceries dropping from his hands, and even through the window and the rain, I could see the terror come over him, and I knew, the whole diner knew, what he was going to do, and a few people whispered, "No, no, don't," even though he could not hear us, because we all knew the one thing you must not do. He ran. He turned and he ran, away from the thing, the most natural thing in the world, the thing every animal in your body screams at you to do. And it was exactly wrong, because running means turning your back. Running means your eyes come off it. Running means long stretches of not seeing, and it only moves when you are not seeing it. He ran, and the lightning flashed, and in the flash, the thing had closed half the distance, and he ran, and the dark came, and the next flash, it was right behind him, right at his back, that tall, burned, silent thing, and Calder ran with his eyes forward and his back to it, and never saw how close it was, and the flash died, and there was one stretch of darkness, one, and then the next flash came, and Calder was gone. There was just a scorch mark on the wet road where he had been, a dark person-shaped burn steaming in the rain, and the thing was gone too, and the groceries were scattered across the sidewalk, an orange rolling into the gutter, and the street was empty, and the storm raged on like nothing had happened. It had taken him in the one stretch of dark, the one moment his running eyes were forward and the night was behind him, and it had left that mark, and that was all. That was all that was left of Calder. The diner was silent. Nobody screamed. That was the worst part, looking back. The thing that told me how deep this went. Nobody screamed. Nobody cried out. Nobody ran to help. The whole diner just watched in a terrible practiced silence. And then, quietly, somebody said a short prayer under their breath, and somebody else put a hand over their eyes, and that was it. They had seen it before. This was not new to them. This was just the legend doing what the legend does to the one person who had not known to get inside. And tomorrow, I understood, they would step around that new scorch mark without looking at it and never speak of Calder again, because that was how the town survived it, by folding the horror up small and quiet and putting it away. I think that was the moment I stopped being the curious outsider pulling a thread and became someone who knew. And I think, too, that some part of me understood, sick and cold, that my digging, my poking, my stirring it all up, the way Marisol had warned me, might have had something to do with this storm coming in so close and so hungry. I had wanted to wake the mystery up. I was starting to think I had. And then the worst storm of the year came, and it caught me out, and I learned the rules the only way they ever really teach you, which is in your own body, with your own life. It was a few weeks later. The wet season was peaking, and Marisol had warned me. Everyone could feel it. The air had that heavy, waiting feeling for days. And then one evening, it broke. And it was the big one, the worst storm anyone had seen in years. And I, who should have known better, who had watched a man burned off the face of the earth, was caught out in it because I had driven across town to bring Odette some medicine she needed from the pharmacy, and I had cut it too close. I had thought I had time, and the storm came faster than I thought. And my car, my unreliable car, chose that evening to die, right out on a stretch of road between the edge of town and Odette's place, with the open fields on either side and the lightning already starting to strike close. I want to tell you what it is like, being out in it, because this is the part that is the real warning. This is the part you need, in case it is ever you, God forbid, in case you are ever the one caught out in the open when it gets close. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did, the things Marisol taught me, the things that kept me alive, so that if you ever need them, you will have them. The first thing I felt when my car died, and I understood I was stuck out there, was the pure animal urge to run, to get out of the car and run for the lights of town, or for Odette's place, run as fast as I could and not stop. And I almost did. My hand was on the door and every part of me was screaming, "Run!" And I made myself stop because I could hear Marisol's voice in my head, gripping my arm. "Do not run. It only moves when you can't see it." So I did not run. I made myself get out of the car slowly, into the pouring rain, into the wind, and I made myself stand still in the open with the lightning crashing down close all around me, and I made myself look. I scanned the open ground, the fields on either side, the road ahead and behind, all of it lit up in stutters by the lightning. And in the dark between the flashes, I kept my eyes moving, searching, because I knew that somewhere out there it was going to appear, and that my only weapon was seeing it. And in the next big flash, there it was, out in the field to my right, maybe 100 feet off, the tall burned thing standing still, facing me, the same shape I had seen across the field that first night from the porch, the same shape that had walked down the street to Calder. And now it was here, in the open, with me, 100 feet away, and I was alone, and there was no diner window between us this time. The flash died. And here is the thing I made myself do, the hardest thing, the thing that saved my life. And I need you to understand it, because it goes against everything your body will tell you. In the dark, after the flash, I did not run, and I did not close my eyes, and I did not look away. I kept my eyes fixed on the exact spot where it had been, straining into the dark, because I knew it was moving in that dark, coming closer, and the only thing that could slow it was my eyes finding it again, the instant the next flash came. I stood in the pouring rain in the pitch dark, with my eyes locked on a spot where I knew a burned silent thing was walking toward me, and I waited for the lightning, and it was the most frightening thing I have ever done. The flash came. It was closer. 50 feet now, out of the field, on the road, coming toward me. And the instant the light hit it, I locked my eyes onto it, fixed it, pinned it with my looking, and it stopped. It stood still in the flash, 50 feet away, that tall, burned wrong thing, and I could see it better now than I ever wanted to. The scorched bark texture of it, the wrongness of its proportions, the way it had something like a face, but the face was faced slightly the wrong way, turned a few degrees off from where its body pointed, and I held it with my eyes, and it could not come. And I want to stop here and tell you what it does to your mind, that staring, because the rules sound simple when you say them fast. Do not run. Keep your eyes on it. But living them is another thing entirely, and you need to know what it is really like in case it is ever you. Your eyes get tired. That is the thing nobody tells you. You cannot blink because a blink is a little stretch of dark, and a little stretch of dark is enough. So you hold your eyes open in the wind and the rain until they burn and water, and the burning makes you want to blink even more. And the whole time your heart is going so hard you can feel it in your teeth. And there is a voice in your head, loud, screaming, "Run, run, you idiot. Why are you just standing here? Run." And you have to fight that voice with everything you have, because that voice is the voice that killed Calder. That voice is the voice that made every one of those scorch marks. That voice is your own body trying to murder you out of fear, and you have to stand there and refuse it while a burned, silent thing waits 50 feet away for you to listen to it. The flash died, dark, and I made myself do the thing. Backward. I took 3 slow steps backward, toward where I knew the shed was, my eyes straining into the black at the spot where the thing had been, my arms out behind me feeling for anything, and the 3 steps backward in the dark with that thing somewhere in front of me closing were the longest 3 steps of my life. The flash came. It had moved. It was closer, 30 feet. near enough now that I could hear it, or thought I could. A faint sound under the storm, like the crackle of something still smoldering. And I locked my eyes on it, and it froze 30 feet away, and the rain hissed off it into little curls of steam even in the downpour, and its wrong face was turned toward me, almost toward me, a few degrees off, and I held it and held it. Dark. Backward. 3 more steps. 4. My heart slamming, the voice screaming run, my eyes burning. The flash. Closer. 20 feet. And this is the part where I almost died. Because at 20 feet, with it that close, the fear got so big that for a fraction of a second my eyes flinched. Not even a blink, just a flinch. My gaze jumping with the shock of how close it was. And in that fraction of a second, in the next flash, it had crossed half the distance, 10 feet, right there, close enough to touch almost. Close enough that I could see there was nothing behind its eyes. Nothing at all. Just the dark, just the open, just the storm looking out through a burned shape at the small, warm thing it had come down to take. And the terror of it, that close, nearly broke me, nearly made me run. And if I had run, I would be a scorch mark on that road right now. But I did not run. I locked my burning eyes onto it at 10 feet, and I held it, and it stopped, and I stood there 10 feet from the end of everything, and I did not look away. Dark. And now the backward steps were a nightmare, because it was so close that I knew that even a few steps of darkness might be enough for it to close the last of the distance, and I had to do them anyway, because standing still just meant dying slower. 3 steps back, 4, feeling behind me desperately for the shed. The flash. It had gained, but only a little, because I'd found it fast. 8 feet, and I held it. 8 feet of burned, silent wrongness. And behind me, finally, my groping hand touched wood. The shed, the wall of the shed, dark. The flash died, and I began to do the thing Marisol taught me, the slow, terrible work of getting to a wall without running and without looking away. I knew Odette's place was behind me and to the left, too far. But there was something closer. An old equipment shed at the edge of the nearest field. A small structure, walls and a door, maybe 80 feet behind me and to the side. Walls. Light. If I could get the door shut and get my phone light on. A place to put my back to something. I started working toward it, but I could not turn around, because turning around meant taking my eyes off the thing, and I could not run, because running meant the same. So I moved backward. In the dark, I would take a few careful steps backward, toward where I knew the shed was, my eyes straining into the black where the thing was, and then the flash would come, and I would find it, fix it, stop it, and gauge how close it had gotten. And then the dark would come, and I would take a few more backward steps, and so on, backward across that open ground in the screaming storm, a few blind backward steps at a time, with a burned thing closing on me every time the world went dark and freezing in place, every time the world lit up. I cannot tell you how long it took. It felt like hours. It was probably minutes. Each stretch of darkness was its own small eternity. Me stepping backward blind, knowing it was moving, not knowing how close it had come, until the flash would reveal it, sometimes a little closer, sometimes much closer, once so close that the flash showed it barely 15 feet away, and I nearly broke. I nearly ran. And I held I held my eyes on it and my ground, and I did not run. And the dark came, and I stepped back, and the flash came, and it had not gained because I had found it fast, and I kept going. And it was in the middle of that, in the longest, darkest stretch, that I understood the thing I have never been able to shake, the thing that is the real horror underneath all the rest of it. Because as I stood out there in the open with that vast storm roaring over me, the whole sky one churning black ceiling lit from within, the lightning reaching down all around, I understood all at once that the burned thing was not a separate creature. It was not a monster that lived in the storm. It was the storm, or it was the storm's hand, the storm's finger, the single point where the vast thing above reached down and touched the ground. The whole storm, the whole enormous black sky from one horizon to the other, was one thing, one single living vast attention. And the lightning was not weather. The lightning was it reaching down, again and again, all over the land, touching the world. And the burned figure was just the shape its touch took when it came down near a person, a place where its reaching had folded itself into something almost like a man, so that it could come and collect what it had reached for. I was not being hunted by a creature. I was being reached for by something the size of the sky, something so vast that I could not see the shape of it any more than an ant can see the shape of the person whose hand is coming down. And the tall, burned thing fixing to take me was just the very fingertip of it, the smallest, nearest point of a thing so enormous that the storm itself, the whole world, ending storm roaring over the entire county, was just the part of it I could see. And it had been doing this here, in this spot, in this stretch of land, long before there was a town, long before there were people to give it a name, or build their shuttered houses against it, or hide its rules in a children's song. It came here. It had always come here. This was a place where the sky reached down, and the town was just a thing that had grown up in the shadow of that reaching and learned it, the hard way, over generations, how to not be taken, mostly, most of the time, by most of its people. We were not its enemies. We were not even really its prey, not the way a rabbit is a fox's prey, with the fox knowing the rabbit and hunting it. We were just small, warm things that happened to live in the spot where it touched down. And when it reached, sometimes its reaching closed around one of us. And that was all. That was the whole of what we were to it, and the not mattering of it. The sheer indifference of a thing that size was worse than any hatred could ever have been. I reached the shed. I felt the wall of it against my back, finally, in a stretch of darkness, the rough wood of it. And I felt for the door and found it. And I had one bad moment where I had to choose, because going through the door meant, for 1 second turning, meant my eyes leaving the open ground, and I knew it was close. The last flash had shown it close. But a wall is a wall, and the rule is get to walls, get to light, and I made the choice. And in the next stretch of dark, I turned, and I wrenched the door open, and I threw myself inside, and I slammed it shut behind me, and I put my back against it. And then I did the last thing, the thing that I think actually saved me, because I do not think the walls alone would have been enough. Not with it that close, not with it reaching that hard. I got my phone out with shaking, soaking hands, and I turned its light on, and I held it up, and I filled that little shed with light, steady light, light that did not flash and die, light with no darkness in it, for the thing to move through, because the whole of its power was the dark between the flashes. The whole of how it moved was the moments you could not see. And steady light, light that never went out, was a thing with no dark in it at all. I stood in that shed with my back against the door and my phone light blazing, and I made a place with no darkness in it. And on the other side of the door, I felt it arrive. I did not see it. I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life. That I did not see it, that the door was between us. But I felt it, the way you feel someone standing right behind you, a presence right on the other side of that thin wooden door. And the door went cold, deathly cold, the cold pouring through it. And there was a smell of burning, of scorched wood and ozone, and I felt it stand there, the fingertip of the sky, right at the threshold, reaching, wanting, so close. And I stood in my little box of light with my back against the door, and I held the light up, and I did not let the dark in, and I waited, and it could not come in. The light held, the walls held, I held, and the storm raged on outside, and the thing stood at my door patient, the way only something that vast and that old can be patient. And I stood my ground in the light, and the minutes crawled by like years. I do not know how long it would have lasted. I do not know if the light would have held all night, if my phone would have died, if the storm would have worn me down. Because I did not have to find out. Because at the worst of it, when I was starting to shake so hard I could barely hold the light, I heard over the storm an engine and tires on wet road, and then headlights swept across the gap under the shed door. Steady headlights, more light, and a voice, Marisol's voice, screaming my name into the storm. She had known. When I had not come back, when Odette had called her frightened, Marisol had known exactly what it meant. A person out in the worst storm of the year, and she had done the thing you are never supposed to do, the thing that takes more courage than I think I will ever have. She had gone out into it. She had driven out into the close lightning to find me, with her own headlights blazing and every light in her car turned on, a moving box of light. And she had found my dead car. And then she had found the shed, and she pulled right up to the door with her brights on, flooding the whole area with steady light, drowning out the dark. And she threw open her passenger door and screamed at me to come. Now, run! The few feet from the shed to the car, through the light, get in. And I did. I came out of the shed into the blaze of her headlights. And for the few feet between the shed door and the car, I was in the open, but I was in light, steady light, her headlights and her interior light all blazing, no dark anywhere, and I crossed that ground and threw myself into her car and slammed the door, and she hit the gas before I even had it shut, and we drove fast through the storm in our little moving box of light, back toward town, toward Odette's, toward walls and lamps and safety. And in the side mirror, in the red glow of her taillights, in one last flash of the lightning, I saw it standing in the road behind us, the tall, burned thing, watching us go, not following, just standing in the rain where the light had left it, getting smaller until the dark and the distance took it, and it was gone. We made it back. Odette was waiting, every light in the house blazing, and she pulled us both inside and held us. And the three of us sat up the rest of that night in the bright, warm house while the storm spent itself outside. And nobody said much. because there was not much to say, because I had been out in it and come back, which almost no one does, and we all knew it. And near dawn, when the storm had finally rolled away, and the first grey light was coming up clean and quiet over a washed and dripping world, Odette told me the rest. The whole truth, the thing the legend was made to hide. She told me because I had earned it, she said, by surviving, by becoming someone who knew. And because now that I knew this much, the rest was safer in my head than the not knowing. She told me that the storms had always come to this place, drawn to this spot for reasons no one had ever understood, that the thing in the lightning had walked here since before there were people, and that when people first came and settled here, not knowing, it had taken them terribly. Whole families in a single bad storm. So many, so often, that the settlement should have died, should have emptied out, everyone fled or taken. But a few had survived, the few who by luck or instinct had done the right things, gotten to walls, kept their eyes on it, stayed still, and those few had slowly, over years, over a generation, pieced together the rules, the real rules, the ones that kept you alive. And then those founders had faced a terrible problem, which was how to make a whole town live by rules that, if everyone understood the truth behind them, would make the town a place of constant terror, a place no one could bear to live, a place where the first real panic would send everyone running into the open to die. You have to understand what they were up against, Odette said, holding her cup of tea in both hands, looking out the window at the grey dawn. Not just the thing in the storm. People. People are the hardest part. You can teach a person a rule, but you cannot make a person live in terror their whole life. Not really. Not for generations. Terror burns out. People who are afraid all the time eventually stop being able to function. And then they make mistakes, or they crack and run, or they leave. And a town where everyone knows the naked truth is a town that empties out or goes mad inside of 2 generations. The founders figured that out. They figured out that the truth, the bare truth, was almost as dangerous as the thing itself, because the bare truth makes people panic, and panic is what kills you here. So they did something very clever and very sad. They decided the town would carry the knowledge, but not the terror. They would keep people careful without keeping them afraid. So they made the legend. They took the truth and they wrapped it in a ghost story, a thing you could tell to children and newcomers, a thing scary enough to make people careful, but vague enough to keep them from panicking. And they took the most important piece of the knowledge, the dangerous secret about the counting, about how it could be called, and they hid it inside a children's rhyme, a counting game, so that it would be passed down forever, mouth to mouth, generation to generation, even by people who had no idea what they were really carrying. They built the town tight and close and shuttered so that no one was ever far from a wall. They put up the siren, and they made a pact never written down, just understood, passed in the blood and the bones of the town, that everyone would live by the rules and no one would speak the truth too loudly, because the legend was a leash the town had put on itself, and the leash was the only thing keeping it alive. The marks on the ground, Odette said, are the ones who didn't believe, the ones who broke the rules, or never learned them, or got caught out, like that poor newcomer. We don't look at them, and we don't speak their names. Not because we're cruel, but because looking and grieving out loud is how the panic starts. And the panic is the one thing that would finish us. So we fold it up and we put it away. And we go on. And we keep the legend alive. And we keep each other inside when it storms. That is the whole of it, Reese. That is what this town is. 100 years of people quietly keeping each other alive from a thing they can't beat and can't run from and can't even really understand. We just live beside it. We just don't get taken. That's the only victory there is. And we win it one storm at a time, and we have been winning it for 100 years, and now you are one of the people who knows how. I stayed. That is the thing you might not expect after all that. I stayed in the town. I think after that night, I could not have left if I tried, because I understood it now. I was part of it now. I had been out in the open with the thing and come back, and that made me one of them in a way that simply growing up there never had. I stayed, and Odette grew older, and I helped take care of her, and Marisol and I grew close again, closer than we had ever been as kids, bound by that night and by what we both knew. And I became one of the quiet keepers, one of the people who watches the sky, who knows the real rules, who tells the legend to newcomers with a friendly smile so they will be careful without being afraid, who steps around the marks without looking and does not say the names. That was a while ago now. I am still here. I still watch the sky. I have gotten good at it, the way Odette was good at it, the way the old families are good at it. I can feel the bad storms coming days off. And when they come, I get inside and I keep my people inside, and we wait it out behind our walls in our light. And we do not say the rhyme. And mostly, almost always, everyone is still there in the morning. That is the life. It is a good life in its way. It is a small, quiet, careful life lived beside an enormous, terrible thing. And there is a kind of peace in it, in knowing exactly what the danger is and exactly how to live beside it, which is more than most people ever get. And that is why I'm telling you all this, because you do not have what we have. You did not grow up in my town. Nobody ever taught you the real rules. You learned that little counting rhyme as a game, the way every kid everywhere learns some version of it, and nobody ever told you what it really is. And that frightens me, because the thing in the storm is not only in my town. It comes to my town the most, that is true. That is the spot where it reaches down hardest. But it is in the sky, and the sky is over all of us. And any storm anywhere, if it is bad enough, if the lightning gets close enough, can be the one where it reaches down near you. So here is the warning, the real one, the one the legend was built to carry. When a real storm comes, the bad kind, with close lightning, get inside before it gets close. Get to walls. Get to steady light. Light that does not flicker. Light with no dark in it. Stay away from the windows during the flashes. And if you are ever caught out in it, out in the open, when the lightning is striking close, do not run. I know everything in you will scream to run. Do not. It only moves when you cannot see it, in the dark between the flashes. So stand still and keep your eyes on the open ground. And when the lightning flashes, look. Find the thing that should not be there, the tall, still-burn shape, and fix your eyes on it and do not look away, and work your way to a wall. Slow, backward if you have to. Never running, never closing your eyes. never letting the dark have your gaze until you reach walls and light. That is how you live through it. That is the whole secret. I have done it. It works. Hold the light and hold your gaze and do not run. And the last thing, the most important thing, the thing I need you to hear above all the rest, that little rhyme, the one about counting the seconds between the lightning and the thunder, the one you know, the one you maybe taught your own kids, the one everybody thinks is just a harmless way to tell how far off the storm is. Do not say it out loud when the lightning is close. I know it seems like nothing. I know it seems like just a song. That is exactly what it was made to seem like. But it is not nothing. It was never nothing. It is the oldest and most carefully hidden piece of all of it. And it is real. And it does what the founders wrote down that it does. It calls. Say it out loud with the lightning close. And you are telling the thing in the storm exactly where you are. And it will answer. And it will come. Everybody thinks it is just a song. It isn't. It never was. And now you know, which means it can find you too, the same as anyone the next time the sky goes black and the lightning starts coming down close. So when it storms, get inside, hold the light, and do not say the rhyme. I have told you everything now. That is all the warning I have to give. The rest is up to you and the sky. It is getting dark out my window, and the wind is picking up, and there is thunder a long way off. So I am going to close the shutters now, and turn up the lamps, and take my place, and watch the sky the way I always will. Stay inside, hold the light, and whatever you do, do not count out loud.